Okay, hi everybody again. And very happy to have you all here today with us for this first dialogue, for this first ICH tourism dialogues. We want to just create this space for having some like interdisciplinary conversations on living heritage and tourism. So we are just following with our work on the web dossier on intangible cultural heritage and tourism, and we want just to have a like conversation with other people, other sectors, or people who have not been here with us in the last years. Also, in this case, we will begin with someone who is part of our field, but we want to talk later also with people from the tourism sector, with practitioners, with like politicians, with tourism industry representatives, with national governments. So we created this space so we can just keep talking, keep improving our toolkit on intangible heritage and tourism. So that's the idea today, and that's the idea with this first one. We will, like, this is like the inauguration of our dialogues. We will have two more this year, and the idea is that we can all propose to have more, like, new conversations. If you have like new ideas about like this kind of dialogues that we can have with other people, like people you know, it can be like community representatives, or it can be also like we were planning to talk with like people from UN Tourism, which is like the new name of the the, the World Tourism Agency, but also with people with like nice practices on tourism and intangible heritage. So today we will start with Halle Butvin, from the Smithsonian, from the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage at the Smithsonian Institution, which is like a research center basically at the Smithsonian Institution. And they are very well known because of the Folklife Festival, which has been there for since the 60s, I think. But they have now this cultural vitality program that Halle is leading, and they work on many other subjects around the world, on cultural industries, on language, on crafts and artisans, on traditional architecture. But they also have like lots of projects on tourism around the world, and Halle has been working on this project since 2015. So they have like many like practices that we asked Halle to share this with us. So thanks, Halle, for being today with us and for just having this conversation with us. The idea is that Halle will will have a presentation of like 20 minutes, 25, something like that. And then the idea is to ask some questions and have a dialogue about how we can improve the toolkit, but also about new strategies for safeguarding intangible heritage and having like nice uh, tourism practices, but also like the problems that we can find and the conflicts we can find in when doing tourism and safeguarding intangible heritage. So thanks a lot, Halle, and welcome.
Thanks, Martin. And nice to see you all. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to participate in these dialogues and also to see so many familiar faces from the meeting in Botswana in December. So it's really nice to reconnect with everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me one moment here. Can everyone see that okay? Good.
Yes, it
All right.
works. It works.
All right. So I'm going to go through some examples of some of our work. For those of you who may not be aware, Martine mentioned the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. So I joined the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, as Martine gave a very good introduction to it. We are the part of the Smithsonian Institution that is really dealing with intangible cultural heritage. We have all of our museums, and our center is really focused on collaborating with communities to research, document, and present ICH. Basically, we don't we use folk life and cultural heritage and some different terminology, but it is the part of the Smithsonian that's really focused on ICH. And our presentation, since we're not a museum, is the main way that we present culture with communities is through the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. So it started in 1967. It is a festival that really grew out of the civil rights movement and also a time of immense change in America and around the world, with really a commitment and an effort to elevate folk and traditional arts, recognizing that there was a lot of changes in culture and the way people experience and access culture. And so the Folklife Festival, by taking place on the National Mall in the United States, the idea was to really create a platform for folk and traditional artists to present. And it started as the Festival of American Folklife. And over time, we started partnering with communities, with countries, and with other communities all over the world. Martina, I think you worked on the Colombia program in 2010, maybe, was it?
11 in 2011. Yeah.
The year messed up. So the picture that's here is actually from the program that we did in 2018, which was Armenia Creating Home. And I'm very happy to see that one of my co-curators, Ruzana Tsaturian, is also on the session today. So when we get to the Q&A, I'm going to be asking her to share about her experience. But the festival, one of the things that we do, it's really primarily about learning and exchange. So there's a lot of work that we do working with festival organizers. The nature of this festival is not about consumption. And I think that is one of the challenges when we've done exchange with festival organizers around the world. It's really not about going and buying things or just consuming and being observers. It's about actually having the opportunity to go and talk to people, learn, try things. It's much more experiential. And so one of the challenges for the festival is the production of it is very intensive. It's very costly. It's a 2-week festival that takes place on the National Mall. It's research-based. So when we're at our best, we're spending a lot of time working with community scholars to make determinations on how we present that cultural heritage to the American public. But what we learned over time is a lot of folks would go back to their communities and, they would have an incredible experience at the festival, but then maybe their kids weren't as interested, or, they didn't find an environment that was conducive to the kind of passion and commitment that they brought back. So the other piece is that it's extremely costly to participate in the festival. So the Cultural Vitality Program was looking at ways that we can take some of the lessons learned and best practice in safeguarding, really, from the Folklife Festival and work with communities to do this in a way that uses the methods, but is a bit different. And so one of the areas where we felt a big opportunity for this was around tourism. So we first had this opportunity about 10 years ago with the USAID funded My Armenia Cultural Heritage Tourism Program. So USAID, it funds our international development work around the world. And the mission in Armenia had asked us, they wanted to do a tourism program. And we had because we're part government, we were able to partner and design a program. And what we wanted to do through that program was see if we could use the Folklife Festival research methodology and the different modes of presentation that we use for cultural heritage, if we could work with communities and apply those methods in situ to develop community-based tourism experiences. So Armenia, gratefully, we had a lot of resources to do this. So what we recognized, there was a little bit of tension, as we all feel, working in the cultural space and working with ICH and safeguarding. It's like tourism can be really fraught, right? So we know that when you're developing cultural heritage tourism, and what I've seen now from working with a lot of folks that are tourism people, is that there's a lot of times non-commercial folk and traditional artists are left out of programs. The programs will focus on what often the phrase is low-hanging fruit. They will just go in and see who already has access to market and tie them into a tour or itinerary without really recognizing the context or who those folks are, or if they really actually are the tradition bearers themselves. And what we can see when this is not done well is that cultural heritage can be generalized, commercialized, and decontextualized, all of which we know can be really dangerous for cultural practice. Often what happens too is that the experience tells visitors a story that's identified by marketing experts, not by the community members themselves. So I don't know about you all, but I've definitely been in a lot of places where there's like a space between the artists or the artisans and the visitor, and there isn't really a way to properly engage. And you also might walk away from the experience wondering, do those artists actually make any money from this experience, or is it just this person who brought us here? And also, following on that is that visitors often have a superficial exchange that's really focused on the commercial piece of it. So even when you travel, if you're trying to go and meet, I'll use artisans as an example, it's focused on shopping. It's really focused on like, let's go to this place and buy things. And so it really, a lot of times doesn't go below that, or deeper than that. It really just stays at that very superficial consumption level. And as a result, minimal person-to-person exchange occurs. This picture here is of Gegam Garibian. He was one of our participants from the Armenia Folklife Festival. And he was, at the time, one of the last remaining tonir makers, the clay oven that is built into the ground. And so we had him come over. And I love, Gegam is such a wonderful example of someone who has the commercial aspect of what he does is completely integrated into the cultural practice. And so it was really fun at the festival. He was selling a lot of toniers to people that were coming to the festival on the side. So Armenia gave us the opportunity to ask the question, is there a better way to do this? And we developed a methodology where we brought together 3 parties. One is tradition bearers themselves, researchers. We partnered with the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography, and Ruzana was one of our researchers from that program. And then you need somebody else. I put a community development specialist, but this could be somebody working in enterprise. This could be a destination management organization or marketing organization. This is going to be your person who understands business, who understands the tourism sector a bit, and is going to be that kind of connection. So our method that we use is really focusing on the research first of identifying who are the tradition bearers in the community, whose traditions are, first of all, appropriate for tourism and who want this kind of access. And then we go through a very careful and intensive process of engagement where, when it's at its best, these 3 people are working very closely in conjunction with each other to develop the tourism experience. So in Armenia, I feel like our strength was really around 2 different areas of ICH. One is foodways and agriculture. This is an experience that's connected to a guest house, to Sona Guest House, that includes foraging as part of the process. A lot of the experiences we did in Armenia, they gave you the opportunity to actually understand either different means of farming or agriculture or fishing, but then you're getting the ingredients and recognizing and learning about the connections to land. And then you're bringing that back to a place where you're then cooking together with the host and enjoying a meal. So again, all of this is kind of then done in context. So you're not going somewhere and just eating a meal. You're participating, and at each stage of the process, you're learning about those practices and what they mean in that particular place, in that particular community. Craft is also very conducive to this, and that it's very popular at our festivals as well. So this is a group called Sicyon Ceramics that has had a lot of success with opening up their workshops. So primarily they had just been selling their products and doing some teaching. They were selling them more at festivals. And now they've been able to open their workshop and invite tourists to come and have a hands-on experience, learning how to actually make the pottery and the history of it and the connection of that pottery to this community, Sicyon, in southern Armenia. This is Artur Petrosyan. I love giving Artur also as an example because he participated both in our Artisan Initiative, which is more focused on enterprise development for artisan-based businesses, as well as the tourism experience. So Artur had taken a basket-making technique that you could see if you go to the museum in Yerignadzor, where he's from. you can see that this type of willow weaving was really, it's in the ethnographic collection there, and it's related to the practices of harvesting and winemaking. But what's interesting is that kind of had died out, and Arthur actually taught himself using YouTube to kind of reinvigorate this practice, and now has really developed a really strong business of making baskets, selling them at festivals. He's doing lighting for restaurants in Yerevan, but he also has a tourism experience where you can go and learn how to make this kind of basket around a wine bottle. So Armenia was what kind of kicked off this process. And then we've had some follow-on projects that we've been doing in the intervening years. The Armenia program lasted from 2015, and then it closed in 2021. And one of the things that I'm very happy about is that Ruzana and also our product development specialist, Narine, have both stayed engaged in the sector. And we can talk about this a bit later in the Q&A, but from what I understand from following up with folks, a lot of these businesses are still in practice, and it has changed the way people travel in some of these destinations, because it creates a lot of opportunities for people to do things around cultural sites. So if you have a destination that has, for example, a historic site in Armenia that was monasteries, the way people used to travel would go to the monastery, maybe they would have a meal at a local restaurant, and then they would leave. But now they can go to that community, they can have an experience where they're learning to cook, they have their lunch, then they're going and learning, going to a winery, visiting a vineyard, learning about the tradition of winemaking and making a basket with Arthur, and now they can stay at B&Bs in the area. And the result of that is they're leaving money in the community. The traditional cultural tourism that we see that's site-based, as we know, a lot of times that money is not getting into the pockets of the local community. It's really going into bigger businesses or tour groups that are just bringing people out to those cultural heritage sites. So the next project that we engaged with, again, funded by USAID, was in Tunisia, and it was looking at this issue. There's a lot of tourists that come to Tunisia. They get a lot of mass beach tourism, very cheap. Again, the money is not getting in further beyond the beaches, and even at the beaches, it's not really, aside from some jobs that aren't the best jobs, that money is not actually getting to local communities. But the country has a very rich and varied cultural heritage landscape. Historically, archaeologically, and in terms of living culture, it's incredible. A lot of living culture in Tunisia today. But when we engaged in the project, there were very few opportunities to actually engage with local people as a tourist. So we started a process there working with the National Heritage Institute and launched a research symposium that was hosted in 2022 in Gabis, where we did a call for researchers to come and have a conversation about ICH and tourism. And again, a lot of dialogue here was focused on what kinds of ICH are actually appropriate for tourism. And there was a lot of conversation about weddings, and particularly in Amazigh communities in the south of Tunisia, and people wanted to recreate weddings. And so it was an interesting process to break that down and think, okay, aside from theatrical presentation, what other types of activities can we do? And so we followed on that symposium. We used that kind of as the groundwork to understand who are tradition bearers in the communities, and a lot of these researchers in Tunisia are based in those communities. They're, community scholars, not necessarily at the Heritage Institute. So we then taught workshops. So there are so many people in this picture, but in the bottom corner near the Smithsonian logo is Ahmed Sharfi. He's kind of my local counterpart. He's sitting cross-legged in a gray sweater. So Ahmed is my local counterpart that's kind of the community development specialist for this project. And then I'm in the middle laughing with everybody. But we taught 4 workshops across the country. We ended up having 280 tradition bearers in those workshops. And what we were talking about in those workshops, again, is presenting the idea of a tourism experience and what that means. And there's a long quote here, but Mohammed Ali Rutimi has been trained by UNESCO in ICH documentation. He's staff in the National Heritage Institute, and he represents Gabis, this region that's kind of a coastal oasis area in Tunisia. And I thought his observations were so helpful because one of the focal points in Tunisia in terms of looking at sustainability of cultural practices is really just looking at selling products. It's so focused on just like selling margoum, selling baskets, selling the products. And what we saw as we were going through this process over and over again with these participants is that they were having the realization that their knowledge has value beyond the product itself. And even for Muhammad, he was thinking like, this is a totally revolutionary way of thinking about how to engage when you're thinking about livelihoods and how important livelihoods are, particularly in a place like Tunisia, where a lot of people are trying to leave, to migrate to Europe. The connection, the connection to place, and the importance of passing things on to the next generation. And so what we were able to do through this project, we trained this bigger group, but then we had a scientific committee that I was not a part of. It was all Tunisian scholars who then looked at the ICH and made a determination, selecting 30 different experiences from this process of people who wanted to engage in tourism and get more mentorship. So that project ended up being called Tunisia's Living Culture. It's still ongoing, but we chose in each 6 regions of the country 5 different businesses, or many of them are tradition bearers who are not businesses yet but want to be. And then they get a lot of support from both researchers and from Ahmed and his colleagues who are community development specialists who are also skilled in the business side of it. They understand how to cost and price, how to get registered, how to connect to local tourism businesses so that you can start to kind of build a little business based on offering this experience to tourists. So last summer, I went with Ahmed and each of our researchers. We had about 15 researchers engaged with this project from all over the country. And we did site visits and sat down and talked with folks about what concepts they wanted to do. They also offered a grants program, which is enormously helpful. So for the tourism experiences that were selected, these 30, they also have access to get grant funding to improve their spaces, to buy equipment, interpretation, signage, things like that. So these are just, actually going back to this picture on the left is our researcher here, and on the right is an elder artisan, and then a young woman from her community who's helping her in developing her experience, which has a lot to do with song and storytelling. And she has a really beautiful kind of house museum that she's built of objects about life in her community in Komrasen, where a lot of traditions are still intact. And so they were trying to figure out what exactly, Aisha is her name, and what is Aisha actually going to offer in this experience and how to structure it. So that's what these meetings were all about. On the left here, we have Surur, who is she works with jewelry artists. And so again, like having these researchers come and have a specialization in a particular area and have that dialogue. One of the things that I think is really beneficial, we often will have research reports, which are great because those can contribute to documentation from the researcher's perspective. We've struggled for the tradition bearers themselves. Some of them use those research reports and hold on to them and really cherish them. Others aren't sure like what to do with it. But I think the bigger piece of value here is that dialogue that happens between the researcher and the tradition bearer. Those interview questions, that kind of oral history interviewing process surfaces. I think when we do our festival, it's something that's really interesting because I notice that there's a bit of a shift from the tradition bearer in terms of how they see themselves in the context of the practice. That it's that process of engagement with the researcher that actually really kind of changes things. And time again, especially from the festival perspective, seeing people who really come out of this process more committed to sustaining these cultural practices and kind of having like getting out of the day-to-day of what they do, of like, I make bread or I make jewelry, and recognizing that it's a thread in a bigger tapestry that they are responsible for and that they feel even more committed to. And I think that's one of the things here in terms of safeguarding that is extremely powerful in creating the space and the resources for that engagement to happen. So a new project that we just launched and we're in the midst of implementing right now is a much smaller project focused on one village, Mukrani Village in Georgia. This is a village that's very close to Tbilisi. The donor for this project owns Chateau Mukrani, which is a very large winery, and he's invested significantly in that winery, which has created jobs for some local people. And there are some heritage sites of significance in Mukrani Village and in the area. There's a Greco-Roman mosaic site that's really significant that he's about to make investments in restoring. There's also a citadel that's right in the middle of Mukrani Village that they're doing some restoration, but they haven't really done a lot of work. There's a foundation there. They haven't worked as much on engagement with local people. And so we're looking at the work that we've done in Armenia and the process that we've been applying in Tunisia and doing a smaller project that's focused only on this village. So we have at the moment Georgian researchers who have been doing oral history interviews, and we'll be using the same process then of bringing people, using that as a connection to the community. And then in April, we'll be teaching these workshops about how to create these concepts and then doing that kind of connection afterwards for a smaller group to local and tourist markets. Something that I wanted to share about this process that I'm very excited about is in Mukrani, because I love working in smaller projects because I feel like you can really kind of sink in and be patient and be creative with what you're doing. And in this case, the director of the local school is very engaged and very committed to getting kids to understand ICH. And so she was showing us, they had done a project previously with researchers where the output was this book that they made with the art teachers about games. So they had youth go and interview elders in the community about what types of games they used to play. And then they made this pop-up book demonstrating what those games were. So for this Mukrani Village project, we engaged the local school. And we always do documentation. We always hire photographers and filmmakers for our projects, recognizing that first of all, it's important for documentation purposes, but it's also really critical if folks are going to engage in tourism to have high quality images and videos of what it is that they're going to offer through their experience. So in this case, we actually have the photographer and filmmaker doing workshops with the local school. We bought equipment, kits for them to keep at the school, and the kids are actually going out and doing the interviews in the community in conjunction with the researchers doing their oral history interview work. So when we go out to do the workshops, the kids are actually going to be putting on an exhibition of their findings. So we're really excited to see the potential for what this type of model can then do for youth engagement, because again, we've seen it in other projects with youth getting interested. You may not have a young person that's going to want to learn how to weave margoon, but if you have a young person who really likes taking photos and videos and doing social media, and maybe they learned English or French and they can engage with tourists, that's another reason for them to stay. They can stay and support and develop it. They can have an opportunity to do something dynamic and find employment in their community that also stays rooted and connected to these cultural practices. So we're hoping that this Mukrani Village experience can also be a case to really evaluate the impact of this and see if this is a model that we can report on and roll out in other communities and kind of look at our lessons learned. So before I go to the final slide is just my contact information, I would say that one of the big things that I really want to share with you in terms of the work, and I would love to answer questions and kind of dig into this a bit more, is that now knowing a lot of people get excited about doing this work. And something that I think is really important is that whoever you're going to be working with, first of all, you need a donor that's very engaged, of course, and has ample resources and patience. USAID in Armenia, it was the first time, the whole first year of the program, we funded research. And that was something that they don't normally do. And it was really hard because they wanted quick results. But the long-term impact of doing that research now, if you talk to the client for that program at USAID, she celebrates the value of that investment and the long-term significance of it. And so I think you have to have supportive donors that are patient with the process. I think the other piece that you have to be really careful about with engaging with the tourism sector, one of my biggest frustrations, is they want to skip over it. I can't tell you how many tourism folks just want to take those research reports, and they don't get that the researchers, in order for this to truly work, the researchers are a part of that three-part model. If you don't have those three components, sorry if I make people dizzy here, but if you don't have these three pieces and they're engaged, it's not going to work. And it's extremely important that the community development specialist, whoever that is, or if you end up working with folks in the tourism sector, that they really respect this. You need people who are passionate about cultural heritage and that they recognize something beyond just the commercial value of it and are committed to that. And I think that the piece here, and what I want to emphasize, is how important the partnerships are. Because if you don't have the right folks here representing these kind of 3 points, it's very easy for this to kind of go sideways and to not have a lot of impact. And I think we're at a stage now where I would really love to kind of go back. The Armenia program ended in 2021. But I really want to go back in the next couple of years and do a follow-on evaluation. We did a lot of evaluation during the program. One of the things that I think was really beneficial was during COVID, a lot of those little tours, we did actually a research study on all of those stakeholders that were offering experiences. And something that was pretty fascinating is they actually fared better during COVID because people in the country wanted to go out to the countryside. So we did a domestic tourism campaign. And I think that's also something that's really important here, is recognizing that the market is also the community itself. So often we want to, people think, oh, well, my goal is to get Europeans or Americans, or they're looking for outside folks that can spend a lot of money. But what we learned as an outcome of COVID is that if you start smaller and you work regionally, and folks that are coming out for weekend visits and people within your own community, it's a lot easier, and you can start to build resilience. And there's also kind of like, people have to practice sharing as well. So it gives, especially for tradition bearers who've not done this before, it can be more forgiving working with folks in your own community and talking through and kind of practicing. It's a very iterative process to get to a point where you're ready. So on the Tunisia project, we kind of have a rubric of whether somebody is visitor ready versus market ready versus export ready. And visitor ready to me is like, you don't need a website. You just need to be on Facebook and communicate with people. You don't need to be able to accept credit cards. You can accept cash. And it's about, so for those small businesses, they should partner. They have to partner with local hotels. They need to know who the tour guides are in their community, because they're looking for these kinds of experiences. And so again, from a sustainability perspective, looking at like tourism, staying small, creating something where you're going to bring in maybe a family of 4, not like a tour group of 20, right? Like it's a different kind of tourism that we're looking to attract by doing this kind of work. So I have lots of other lessons learned, failures, successes, but I want to pause there so that we have lots of time to discuss.
Thank you very much. It was really fascinating. Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think we all have like lots of questions. So I think we can start. For me, this was like very particularly like interesting also because I was there in 2011, as you were saying, also with lots of community like bearers, tradition bearers. Like we have like 100 people from Colombia there. Like, and it was the first time they were traveling. For many of them, the first traveling, like just the first time taking a plane, and to spend like a couple of weeks almost in Washington, D.C., and with a lot of people asking was like life-changing for them. And then they came back and something happened, not only in their lives, but also they were kind of like also like some kind of attraction. They were like one new tourism destination because they were part of the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. And then there comes many of my questions about this, about, okay, what happens? I mean, because you have been following like this Armenian case, but how do you think about like doing like some kind of follow-up to other cases? And you think sometimes about doing some kind of like guidelines about tourism after the festival? Because I have seen that it has like lots of impacts after the festival for many of these communities. So I think that some kind of guidelines, and also thinking about our toolkit, and especially about our chapter on the first steps of action, because we have also this toolkit exists because many of us as NGOs, we receive like people all the time asking, okay, how to do this, how to approach intangible heritage and tourism. And in most of the cases, it's people like just the communities asking about what to do, and then that's part of the point of the toolkit. So yeah,
I was
what do
really
you think?
happy when I had told Martine this before. So we'd been teaching these workshops, and then I saw the toolkit came out, and I got really nervous because I thought, uh-oh, this is going to be like the definitive guide. And I'm going to find out that we've been doing things that are like not right. And then when the toolkit came out, it was so affirming and validating for the work that we were doing. And now I use it, I share it with folks as an additional resource and kind of draw on the information that's in it. So, and I just joined the working group for tourism because I'm really interested in this, in case studies, and Martine, with what you were talking about. I mean, everything is about resources. We talk about it all the time of wanting to actually go to communities and look at other folklife festivals, what that long-term impact has been for people, whether or not they engage in tourism when they come home, and what did they learn from the process, and what might they have applied. And I think we've been going through implementation and really focused on implementation. And I'm hopeful that in the next couple of years, we can at least have some of our team pivot a little bit to go back and do more reflective work and kind of understand what worked, what didn't. I'm sure if we go back to Armenia, some of those businesses aren't going to be doing tourism anymore. And I want to know why. Like, what is it that worked for them? What hasn't worked? And to try and, like you said, establish some guidelines and understand, and not just from like a business perspective, but from a safeguarding perspective. Like,
Yeah,
what impact has this had on the community and looking at it from the cultural practices themselves, and what has happened there.
yeah, and I am a bit curious about like this, like the community development specialist, which is like maybe in the toolkit we don't have like this kind of figures, or like this other actor who must like kind of be there accompanying the whole process. Maybe because in some cases it's not possible because you don't have the funds for having this like other actor. Also because sometimes we don't even think about that. So how is this experience of the community development specialist, and how to deal with this figure, and what's your experience with that?
Yeah, that role is so important. And I think actually what's interesting in Georgia is we weren't sure in Armenia and in Tunisia, the program had funded people who were tourism experts to be a part of the project, who delivered that part of the work. And in Georgia, instead of looking for people in Georgia that already did that, we looked within the community, and we found this young woman, Vansa, who had gone out. She'd studied economics in Europe and had come back home during COVID and started kind of like a grassroots civil society organization to like get people engaged in volunteering and all of these different aspects of like why it's important to be a part of your community. So she's done a lot of grassroots activism. And when we were doing our initial meetings, we asked her if her organization, because they recently registered as an NGO, if they would be interested in developing skill sets around this kind of very basic business development. And so through this process, they don't have those skills now. She has some of that educational background, but we're actually going to be developing through direct work with them, some training materials and templates and toolkits for those pieces of the work and how to do that. And also how do you, because I think one of the things that sometimes we take for granted is that, you know, if we build it, people will come, and that's not true. So we can create a beautiful experience, but if there isn't some marketing in place, and again, you thinking consciously about the types of tourists that you actually want to bring into this. So adding some extra materials, we're excited about being able to do that in Georgia with this work, to kind of set some guides on how do you actually go in and connect people to the types of tourists that are going to contribute to what the community actually wants for their tourism.
Yeah, so Urian, do you want to?
Oh, about the mediator or broker role.
Yeah, because we included like this figure of the mediator in the first steps, which was also kind of another question I had. I mean, because we are always like trying to improve the toolkit. So which are like your recommendations for like these first steps to action in the cases in the cases you know already?
In the toolkit?
Yeah, in the toolkit also for improving this part of the first steps. Which have been for you like these first steps?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What advice would we give?
What are the first steps for like approaching these cases, these projects on intangible heritage and tourism? Is there like some guidelines we can give to the people for like doing these first steps? Because it is so different. I mean, the contexts are so different, the situations are so different. That was also like one of the questions we had. Okay, should we give some kind of first steps, some guidelines for approaching these situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to name a few, but I feel like it's something that we could kind of put together and contribute to the dossier as well. But if I'm thinking of like how to do this in a particular community, I would hope that to start with, there's something already. Is there a hotel? Is there a local festival? Like, who's engaged in the area? Are there other tourist attractions nearby? If there are, then doing the research on who are the people, like getting to know who the tour operators are, who the hotels are, like who are the folks in the tourism sector that you can reach out to. I mean, it's honestly as simple as getting folks organized so that they can offer something, and then making a flyer with the information and pricing and giving that to hotels. That can get somebody started. Even if there's one hotel or bed and breakfast, and you're able to give a stack of flyers to that hotel about that tourism experience, you would bring them to experience it, for example. So you might bring the front desk staff or something like that to actually come. We call them fam trips in the tourism sector, or familiarization trips, right? So you're bringing people who, you think about who in that community would interact with tourists. And then once this experience is prepared, you invite them in to basically be visitors and to do that. When you do that, even in Tunisia, I hired a tour guide to be a translator for me for a part of that trip. And you better believe, none of these artists were ready, but he was getting their contact information and planning to integrate them into his itineraries from the beginning, because people want ICH as a part of the tourism experience. So if you can find out who those folks are, who those tour guides, who the folks at the hotels, they would love to be able to recommend to their guests things that you can do. So now, who's going to do that? Like in my mind, when you have a project, that can be a community development specialist. If you're doing this within your own community, that can be you. So it kind of just depends. Like, I think that we could create some kind of step-by-step pieces that are really practical of what the tourism experience host needs, and what types of people they reach out to, and what kind of information they share with them.
So I could follow with my questions, but if someone else wants to ask some questions to Halle, it will be great as well. So please, someone wants to take the floor to ask some questions or some comments? Yeah, you're right.
If no one else is yet starting, I will start. Do you ever work with a kind of protocol or charter at the local level, for example, among the types of partners, or something that is similar?
We do set up an MOU with our partners. So with our research partners between the Smithsonian and the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography, we tried in Tunisia and we were unable to do that. And I think that actually caused problems because it was not easy. We ended up having to work with researchers from a bunch of different institutions, and that was very unwieldy to implement. And so it really, like, the success of that project is going to depend on who really cared the most and wanted to participate in it, because there was no obligation. If you're doing this from a project, doing an MOU, and if there are resources paying the researchers throughout the project for their engagement, I can't emphasize how important that is. And so in Georgia, we don't have an MOU with the researchers because they are independent, but we have an MOU with the foundation that we're partnered with in Mukrani. It's the Foundation for Regional Economic Development of Mukrani. And so we lay out through that MOU our roles and responsibilities, which I think is very important of getting the players on the same page. Now, that's not with the tradition bearers themselves. That's at the level of, like, Smithsonian's going to deliver, this content, and the foundation is going to hire they're hiring the local, committing the resources to the local researchers, the documentation kind of folks, the equipment kits for the school. But so we're in agreement on who's doing what and the timeline. I think that's very important.
Because that's what struck me in your presentation. You have the model, the triangle model, but you see their development, but you don't see their, like, tourist actor.
The tourist actor in that is the community development specialist. So I think but they're like the mediator, I guess I would say, from
yeah. But that mediator is already coming from a development perspective.
That's it, is you need that person. So I would say that they're kind of connecting out to the field. But I think the important piece of that is for them to be in that process. That's what I was saying earlier. Like, we went through folks on our Armenia project who just were great people in terms of tourism, but they just didn't get it in terms of the cultural heritage part. And the woman that we worked with towards the end of the project, for her, it clicked into place. She understood the value of the research. So if you are going to work like that person, ideally, if they're a tourism person who also has a passion for working with local communities and for working with ICH, then that's a golden thing. Like, hold on to that person, because I think, to me, I mean, it may sound crazy, but, like, you need someone who really loves this work and who really cares about people, who really cares about safeguarding ICH. Like that, I don't think that that's something that can be taught. I think that that's something that is either in people or isn't. And so that's part of that team building approach that I think is really important, is, like, not to waste time having people on your team that don't actually, like, deeply care about what it is that they're doing. I don't know if I don't want to miss the opportunity because we have Rosanna, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but she's implemented this too. I don't know if you want to share from your perspective.
Yeah, we also have Kat. Will let Kat, because Kat will be our next.
Hi, everyone.
Our
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. And I joined a bit later on, so perhaps I missed the information. My apologies. And I was wondering, indeed, involving the tourism actors, also one of those pillars to make sure that you have somewhat of a streamlined process, or at least the fundamentals for cooperation. I wonder, like, was there also feedback from the tourism actors and the visitors regarding those experiences? Like, how did they feel about it? Is there some information about that available?
So we don't have anything kind of published online, but what we did is we developed these surveys. So I was mentioning that it's kind of an iterative process, and familiarization trips are really like the best thing that you can do. And so in Armenia in particular, because in Tunisia, we're just getting started on that process. But in Armenia, they were intensive and we did them all the time. We were bringing people from the project, we're going there all the time. Then we did have researchers go back out and experience and give feedback. Then we also had tour operators, hotel folks, and we literally would have our community development specialist actually be on the bus with all of these people, going on the trip with them, giving them the background of all of it, and being there answering questions. And so you would have like the tour operators, the hotel folks, guides, anyone that's kind of in that tourism sector, stakeholders that want to be able to offer ICH experiences. Then they would fill out, part of their agreement of going is that they also would fill out a survey and get that feedback. And so again, that was the role of the community development specialist working with the tradition bearer. Now the researcher, again, to me, in that best practice piece, is also involved in that process and continuing to give feedback to the tradition bearer about about what's going on, like observing, wearing the hat of the researcher as a visitor and understanding what's happening and looking at the dynamic. I think that's also the best case scenario if you can make sure that the researcher is a part of that process.
Thank you.
Now, Rosanna, yeah, Rosanna is there. Because, yeah, it would be great.
Yeah, I'm
if
here.
we can,
I'm here.
also share from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Halle. She gave me so much credits that now I'm a bit surprised. I did not plan to have a speech here, but however, I'm very happy to join this meeting because myself, I'm also working on ICH in my country, in Armenia, and with also UNESCO ICH policies, and I'm running also an organization, grassroots civil society organization, Culture for Sustainable Development. And as Halle told, I feel I was always caring about the people, and the most thing Halle already heard about this word maybe thousands of times since our working, and mostly all the time I'm trying to keep the role of the guardian for the ethics of safeguarding of ICH. And I see that all the projects who will work for tourism and ICH should keep in mind that they should serve as guardians of that ethics and not letting ICH work for tourism and spoiling the ICH and interrupting that living continuation of the heritage and transmission of the heritage, and seeing that involvement of ICH practices in tourism just like as a product, not as a value. And for all the projects, I would recommend, based on my experience as a researcher and someone who is all the time looking very closely to how people are working with ICH, to make that feeling constant of being proud of their own cultural heritage. That's the most important key moment of productive work for the team, for the project, for the people connected, for tradition bearers. If the project is going in the right direction, the project bearers will get at some point that loud impression of being proud of their own cultural heritage. If not, they will try somehow modestly or in a hidden way, trying to understand what to sell just. Otherwise, this feeling of being proud of their heritage can motivate also back the researchers and the development specialists who usually do not feel that ethical part, sorry for these words, and not that much valuing the local knowledge, local traditions. They have their own stuff, they have their own job. They need to sell this to the market. But this multi-perspective approach to ICH, to the projects who are implementing ICH programs, should keep all the time that ethics and respect for tradition bearers. This would be the key moment I would like to share with you.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. Yeah, it's like really nice to have you here today as well. Okay, so already 1 hour. I don't know if we have one last question. I would have, or if you want to say some final words, Halle.
Jana has a question, I think.
Jana, okay, sorry.
Sorry, I couldn't find the raising hand in a few seconds. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. And of course, I was trying to adapt all your experiences to the Slovak reality. And I had of tourism packages consisting of making an opportunity for tourists to meet a Romani string ensemble, to spend excellent, pleasant time with them, to talk with them about their music culture and so on and so forth. And of course, as an ethnologist, I was thinking, what is the sustainability in this regarding creating opportunities for this Romani band to make another source of income out of these tourism experiences. And what unfortunately, what I came to an end with my thinking is what I was thinking also listening to you when you were talking about the bearers, the mediators and so on. It somehow created a chain of tourism actors, hotels, some hotel desk managers who could promote flyers and so on. Many like people on the chain leading to a final bearer of the ICH. And I would like to ask you about money, because the bearer expects also some income from this tourism product. How does it work when too many people, mediators, or too many middle steps people are involved in this and also expect a payment?
Yeah.
And how do you make sure that the final bearer gets what it's worth and really gets enough money for his input into this, so the cost of the whole package, tourism package, doesn't become too expensive, for example, for the tourists?
The idea here is the way that we do the work is actually direct to consumer for the most part, but we work with the tradition bearers on the pricing. So no matter what, they are they're putting a price on the experience that they are going to be paid for that experience, and they are determining that. So that's part of the process that we work through with the development specialist of a very specific costing and pricing activity so that they are being appropriately and ethically compensated for what they do. Now, if a tour group wants to add something on top of that, that's normal when you get into a supply chain. But the other piece is for that tradition bearer to also learn how to do direct to consumer marketing, because a lot of visitors are not going through packages anymore. So there could be something small for a hotel might want some kind of added compensation. A lot of times they don't. They just want something to be able to give to their guests. And so what you would do with that is like the flyer would have a price on it. They're not paying the hotel, they're paying the host. The money goes directly to the host. Again, I think that that's a piece, maybe like when it comes, Martine, we can talk like on the dossier of like getting some more specific kinds of tools on how to cost and price an experience. Because I think, again, that is a piece of this that's very powerful for people to understand and to be able to do that on their own. They need to be registered businesses, though. This is where that part is really important, is that people need to if they want to do this and if they want to protect themselves, they do have to build those skills so that they can actually, you know, have that agency and that ability to say, this is how much you need to pay me in order to come and have this experience, and feel strong about why it's important not to take less money and to make that happen, and how to reach the customers who are going to pay for that.
Mhm. So your workshops also involve also these kind of topics and aspects of that. Yeah, because I think this is somehow crucial for establishing such a business model. Or sorry for calling it like that, but yeah.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It is. Part of it is about diversifying that income. I think that piece of it, the economic piece of it, is extremely important for people.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
can't make a living, they're going to do something else.
Yes,
So
of course.
it really contributes to
Mm-hmm.
the vitality of these practices.
Because my experience in Slovakia is that before the bearer, as a recipient of the income, come too many people who also would like to take some share of the price, and that is making the whole experience inaccessible for many tourists.
Artisans, like, of recognizing that there is that cost and price piece. I used to teach it for artisan businesses all the time. And that piece is like can be some of the most empowering information that a tradition bearer can learn, is how to appropriately cost and price their work, whether it's their time, which a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their minds around, or the product itself, and understanding the significance that if they take less than that, what that actually means. And so I think that's a very transformational moment for people to recognize that, like, their knowledge has value, and this is how you price it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, Halle, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Really, lots of ideas, lots of inspiration. And yeah, I think it's already more than 1 hour. So thanks a lot to everyone, because you have been here like more than 1 hour.
Yeah,
So
thanks for everyone's attention and for the opportunity to share a bit. We're going to be putting the slides online with the presentation, and I'll include links to all the projects. We have a lot of, especially for Armenia, some really beautiful documentation.
nice.
More articles and information, so it'll have a lot of hyperlinks in it if you want to learn more. And then also my email address, please don't hesitate to connect with me. I'm always happy to talk about this work and to exchange and learn from what you all are doing as well.
That's great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Halle, because it was very, very nice to have you here today. Our next one will be with Kat, who's here as well on April 26th, on Friday. So you're all invited for the next one. And thanks a lot. I think it was really, really inspiring again, and amazing. So see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
So much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good to see you all.
Bye.